Hello everyone and welcome back to Cinderful Gaming. I hope you're all doing well, I hope you're all staying safe, and most of all I hope you're all fighting that war against the Grey. Today we've got another video in our Start Collecting series. This series is meant to look at the various Start Collecting boxes available in Age of Sigmar and sort of explain you through what you are getting in that box for the particular army. We'll also then talk about how these units work and do they give you a solid base or not to start your army, or if you can expand upon them, how to expand upon those things within the box. Many of the Start Collecting boxes are fantastic ways, not all as straight as simple as pulling them out of the box and work perfectly, but many form a great foundation for an army starting. So, without any more talking about it, let's get into this one that we're going to talk about today, and that is the original Children of Chaos, the Beasts of Chaos. I've actually got an army of Beasts of Chaos on the table right now, getting painted up in a Darkwalker scheme. They're really fun to paint, and just really unique, cool looking models. For the start of this, I'm going to talk about the units that we're getting inside the box. And so the first model we get is our hero, which is the Great Bray Shaman. You can see him down in the middle at the front of the army box display. He's a Beast of Chaos wizard that benefits all your units nearby with extra movement. He also has his own spells that he can do and stuff like that, but he is in general a great starting character to get for Beasts of Chaos. You'll be looking to take one, if not multiple, of this guy in your future armies, so I really do rate him being the character within the box. He is actually also the only plastic character available for the army outside of the tzeentch range. We then look at the units we've got inside the box, and the first one of them you can see to the left of the picture are these heavily armoured beastmen known as Bestigors. Bestigors are your elite foot troops, standard infantry. They are one wound infantry and they carry massive great axes. This unit is really good at taking on high damage or high defensive foes with their great damage output, although they can be quite frail in return. Beasts of Chaos generally do suffer from this as a result in general, in that they can generally put out quite a fair bit of damage, but they can't necessarily take that damage back. Probably an important thing to note about this Start Collecting box at the moment is it's actually very low points wise. This box barely scratches 500 points, in fact I'm pretty sure it is significantly lower, and it is one of the few boxes available that doesn't give you a lot of points. That being said though, this is something that Beasts of Chaos do to cover their disadvantage of not being overly tough, in that they have lots of numbers on the table. So let's talk more about those numbers, and we'll start looking at the other unit inside the box, and that is Ungors, or Ungor Raiders. This unit here can be built as you see with swords and shields, or random melee weapons and shields, same thing, but can also be built as an archer variant that has some really cool maneuverability abilities, and also it gives you the idea that you can actually have a ranged unit within this army. I would actually recommend building the Ungor Raiders to start with in this box, as it gives you an overall look at the game and they'll give you a shooting unit to play around with and learn the game with. They're also probably the more useful of the two lots of units, though Ungors do have their place as a cheap unit that can actually do some quite high damage output, much like many things in Beasts of Chaos when given the right buffs. The last piece inside this Start Collecting box is the Cygor and Gorgon kit. This is a towering monster that Beasts of Chaos are really prosperous with. You can get so many different monsters, and we'll talk more about them later, but in the box we get the Cygor or Gorgon kit. You can see here is the Cygor, and he is a wizard eating monster. You can also get a Gorgon, which is a giant four-armed minotaur fueled with hate, anger and bloodlust. So all in all, I really do think this is a great start to a Beasts of Chaos army, if not a little light on the point side, but that is just something that you're going to have to get used to with Beasts of Chaos. Where we go next from this box is up to you, But here are some suggestions that I have, and most certainly my first suggestions would be expanding upon the units we already have inside the box. You could get more Ungor Raiders, and you can also get more Bestigor. Those Bestigor, when they're in large units, really become a serious threat on the table that your opponent needs to worry about. A second Great Bray Shaman wouldn't go amiss either, as these characters are really useful at just giving you that extra bit of speed right off the bat. However, let's start looking into what I've put here for some suggestions, and the first one being a Doom Bull. This is a great monstrous hero that has really high damage potential, and he's a bit tougher than your Great Bray Shamans. He can be quite nasty in combat, and he also has the Bulgor keyword, and he combines well with the Saigon Gorgon kit. Looking at the unit I've got down to his bottom right, you can see they are Bulgors. These are your generic Minotaurs in the army. They're not the giant ones like you see here with the Saigon Gorgon, and they're not the leader character like the Doom Bull, but these are your generic Bulgors, and they can actually be battle line if your Doom Bull is the general. So this is an elite monstrous infantry unit, and just gives you something else to play around with. They're also really cool models, and I'm a big fan of the Bulgor models. It will just give you another layer of which to play around with your Beasts of Chaos. Speaking of layers and things that are different that you can play around with in Beasts of Chaos, let's talk about what I've got on the bottom left of all the units there, and the cockatrice, or in general just monsters for Beasts of Chaos. Beasts of Chaos have a plethora of different monsters that you can play around with, and all of these are just cool centerpieces that you can paint up. Some of them aren't though, even that bigger monster. You have herds of some monsters like Chaos Warhounds and Razorgors, which are much smaller monsters, but you can just throw them into your army and create a great look of diversity within the force. Many of these monsters have cool and unique rules, from the Jabberslife, which sort of does some mortal wounds back to your opponent as it dies, or the Giant, which is a very chaotic version of the regular Giant. The cockatrice shoots people and petrifies them to stone. And you've also got obviously the Saigon Gorgon kit, which you could also grab a second one of and build as the alternate variation that you didn't build with your Start Collecting box. In general, I would always recommend going for some monsters with Beasts of Chaos, because they're just what the army is all about, having some cool monsters. They really break up the monotony that can be when you have loads of the Gore, Ungor and Bestigor within the army. They give you something else different to work on when painting, and you can really add some splashes of colour to your army. The last suggestion I've got here, and what I've got pictured, is actually Tzeentch Enlightened, but the Tzeentch range is something I strongly suggest looking into. These are tzeentch specialised beastmen, and you can either get them on foot in a much more Gore Bestigor sort of look, or you can get them on the discs of tzeentch, which are either the combat variation called Tzeentch Enlightened, which can also be on foot as well. They do not have to be mounted on discs, or the bow option of Tzeentch Skyfires. There's also a character called a Tzeentch Shaman, which is a beastman shaman who is dedicated to tzeentch atop a disc. Tzeentchs are a really good chance to play around with colours you haven't played around with in your original palette, and they're also a great addition to the army, giving you some much needed speed that doesn't need to rely on Bray Shamans, although the Bray Shamans can compound their already great speed and make them even better at what they do. Tzeentch are also much more powerful than your average Gore, and generally do a bit more damage than them. They're sort of a midway point between regular Gores and Bestigors. However, the Enlightened and the Skyfires are really elite troops, coming in units of 3. The Skyfires put down an amazing amount of shooting, and the Enlightened are fearsome in combat. But that's just some suggestions from me on where you can go after the start of the Start Collecting box. I hope this video has been helpful for anyone with Beasts of Chaos. If there's a Start Collecting box you'd like to see me talk through a little bit about and explain the units within the boxes and talk about where you can go from it, please leave that in the comments down below. Also, if you have Beasts of Chaos and you're interested in the army, or just leaving some of your own information, please leave that in the comments down below. It's also worth noting that this is not a competitive tutorial or competitive suggestions anyway. This is how to get all the units in your Start Collecting box working and giving you a full army and an understanding of the army of Beasts of Chaos. However, that's enough rambling from me today. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel. We're so close now to 1,000. It's great. And I will see you all again real soon. Stay safe, everyone. Stay well. And most of all, keep fighting that war against the grey. Ciao for now.